Hey there. So it's Saturday around midday. If you mark the seasons by the amount of daylight and nighttime, then this is on the cusp of summer and autumn because today is the fall equinox. I'm out here inspecting my brassicas, my cabbages, kale, etc. for pests, particularly for um, butterfly larvae, caterpillars, and I thought I would just look at a couple of things here in this part of the kitchen garden and yeah, see what we can find. So let's take a closer look. Right here you can see by my shoulder is lacinato kale, or sometimes called Tuscany kale, sometimes called in Italian cavolo nero, black kale, and sometimes people call it dino kale, which is a really fun name. So let's take a look at that and some other kinds of kale and see how they're doing with respect to the insect life around them. Okay, yeah, so this is, let's call it Tuscany kale, and it has this nice almost bluish color to it. It does really well at the end of summer and in the autumn as the temperatures fall and we get some more substantial rainfall usually. And I don't really see any kind of damage. It did get attacked a little bit by some caterpillars earlier this year, but now it's doing just fine. So if we come over here, we can see what probably most people associate with kale, and that is curly kale. And I usually look for some excrement. It's a telltale sign. And yeah, there's something hiding in there. Looks like probably the larva of a cabbage moth rather than a cabbage white butterfly or a white butterfly. I'm not 100% sure, but that's my suspicion. And this guy's probably doing some mischief in here. So this is flat leaf kale or Russian kale. And here I've been finding a few larvae, a few caterpillars of the small cabbage white butterfly, like this guy here. And I've also been seeing a number of ichneumon wasps, parasitoid wasps here, and that's maybe something we can take a brief look at as well. Back at the curly leaf kale again, and that's because I wanted to get a shot of this ichneumon wasp here, if I can. Let me change the orientation of the camera. It's a little bit easier to zoom in that way. Now I should be able to get a better shot. And I'll continue to use this orientation for now. So all around the vegetables in this garden, we grow other plants to help support beneficial insects. For instance, just across the path here is some fennel. Parasitoid wasps are highly specialized in terms of the host species of their larvae. Many species specialize in just a few or even just one host species. But fortunately, the adults are a little less picky and therefore can be supported through some basic garden plants, and those include plants like this fennel here, where you can see that there are already several species of ichneumon wasp, but also hoverflies feeding in the very flat flowers of the plant. So over here in this half whiskey barrel we have bronze fennel, which is actually the same species as the green fennel we just looked at, but this won't develop the bulb-like structure that cultivars of what is called Florence fennel do, and which are used in cooking. But it still does produce seeds and stems and leaves that can be used in the kitchen. So fennel is actually native to the Mediterranean, but it's very common here in Northern Europe and elsewhere. However, it does produce a lot of seeds and it can become a weed, so I grow it strictly in container settings, like this half whiskey barrel, both or for its value in the kitchen, but also as an ornamental. It's a very beautiful plant, and for its support of beneficial insects. I could just note that growing in back of this fennel is actually a linden tree which I've coppiced, and that'll be probably a subject of some video some other time. So hopefully you notice that growing together with this fennel are these nasturtiums. Not only are they beautiful ornamental plants that flower really for months and months, but they are edible. And they're most often used in salads. Nasturtiums are actually in the same order as brassicas, but they're actually not in the genus Nasturtium, which includes watercress and is actually in the brassica family, but rather garden nasturtiums are in the genus Tropaeolum, which is actually not so related to watercress. So besides being beautiful to look at, I have some hope that these nasturtiums can work as a kind of trap for large cabbage white butterflies. These butterflies definitely love nasturtiums, but whether they prefer them or at least get distracted by them is something that still needs to be demonstrated. There doesn't seem to be much systematic research into this yet, but it's worth a try. So let's come back to fennel now. Fennel is in a family with many other familiar garden favorites. This family is called Apiaceae, but it's alternatively called Umbelliferae because of these umbels. And here you can think umbrella. And this is the flower formation of almost every species in the family. The family includes carrots, parsnips, celery, parsley, dill, coriander, cumin, anise, and that's just to name a few commercially important crops. But it also includes this one here. This is ground elder, which is a pretty dreaded weed in garden beds in some parts of Europe. And it's actually considered an invasive weed in some other parts of the world, for instance, in parts of North America. And then I would like to mention that the family also includes some very poisonous plants like hemlock. So if you're out foraging for some nice culinary herbs like angelica or sweet cicely or chervil, then you should be careful what you get your hands on. Typically it's the smell of these plants which help distinguish them from hemlock, for instance, which smells quite bad. But anyway, let's go and look at some other plants in this family of which I'm pretty certain. So this is the umbel of a domesticated carrot, the kind of carrots that we grow in our gardens and we eat. And they are quite popular with many insects, including wasps and flies. And here, apparently, I think bees, a certain kind of bees. I believe this is a blood bee. I'll have to check that one. I believe it's Sphicodes. I'll have to check that in post-production, so to speak. Anyway, so what I've done here is I've let carrots from last year bolt in order to produce some seed, like this. And at the same time, I've grown beets among the individual carrot plants that were allowed to bolt, as you can see here. And in that way, I'm able to use the space both for producing carrot seeds and for producing beets here in the fall. So this little wasp here has found an umbel that looks quite similar to the one that we saw just previously, and so has this little hoverfly. This is actually the same species, but this is a wild carrot, and in my zeal to provide some habitat for these insects, I actually may have made a small mistake with respect to the seeds I'm trying to grow, because wild carrots can pretty easily cross with domesticated carrots, and that cross is likely to be completely inedible. Fortunately, carrot seeds remain viable for around 3 years. So what I can do is I can trial a few, see if I get back something very close to the variety that I take the seeds from, and if I do, then the next year I can use those seeds, and if I don't, well, then in the bin with those seeds. So let's see how that turns out. One more thing, we can actually make a good comparison here between yarrow, which I talked about in another video, and these carrots. Superficially they may look similar, but as you can see, the flower heads of the yarrow and the umbels of the carrots are actually quite different. As we discussed, yarrow is in the aster family, and it actually has these composite flowers when you look more closely. And then the umbels of the carrots contain these single little flowerlets. Sorry about the wind, but yeah, let's go see what else we can find when it comes to these umbellifers, as they're sometimes called. So just to complete the picture, here are the tiny umbels of celery. And here you can see some maturing seeds. I mostly save seeds for propagation purposes, but of course celery seed is an important flavoring in the kitchen. Okay, so that's going to be it for today. I have a ton of tomato soup to make. If you have any feedback or suggestions for content, etc., feel free to leave those in the comment section. Bye for now.